We've got rivalry games to talk about. There's some fallout. We've got to talk about the Pac-12's plan for 2026 and a huge weekend, maybe the biggest weekend of the college football season, regular season at least, ahead of us. I'm John Canzano. He's Jon Wilner. You know where to find my work. You know where to find his work. Wilner, let's jump right into it. Rivalry games, Oregon State in the Civil War, Washington State in the Apple Cup. Where do we start?
Let's start with the Apple Cup. I mean, we don't need to get too deep into the what happened in the games, but I just was curious about the fallout in Pullman. I thought they played well. That was a touchdown game, 7-point game at the end of three quarters. Washington State played well, but the whole thing raised a couple of questions in my mind about the direction of the program, right? Did you watch Zevi Eckhouse? The guy was really good.
Really good. Played really well.
And I thought to myself, how was he not the starting quarterback for Washington State in week 1 and week 2 and week 3? And how did Jimmy Rogers and his staff determine that Eckhouse was basically the third stringer? And that just, like, if I'm a Cougar fan and I'm seeing that, I'm scratching my head thinking, wait, what are those guys seeing? Because it's not, it doesn't appear to be the reality. And does that make you wonder, if you're a Cougar fan, do we have the right people in place here if they can't figure out the quarterback situation? I don't know. That was just one of my takeaways.
I think both coaches, I left that game thinking about both coaches. One, yes, the quarterback situation in Washington State is peculiar. At least, right? And I didn't like that Rogers went into fall camp and said, hey, we're going to go live fire on these guys because I want to see them under fire. We're not going to determine who the starter is. It just feels like week to week through fall camp, there was all this confusion about the quarterback position. And does he know how to manage a quarterback and a quarterback competition? And it looks like his best guy, he had ranked third. So, that is a question. I also wonder about Jedd Fisch. Why is Damon Williams Jr. in the game with 3 minutes to go in this game? And the game was out of touch.
Yeah.
Clearly, Washington has bigger football games, including the game this week against Ohio State. Yes, I know you're upset about how things went in the Apple Cup a year ago. You want to punctuate your victory. You want to prove a point. But, man, I was watching that at the end of the game, and I thought, the wrong thing happens here, and your season is disrupted, your whole season. I don't know why he was in the game at the end, but I think both coaches had some questions to answer.
Yeah, and then Rogers in the post game, he gets up at the podium and he starts talking about the money disparity, right? We can't compete against a $30 million roster. Well, first of all, the Huskies don't have a $30 million roster, but that's not what Washington State fans want to hear.
Yeah.
That's a proud program. They beat the Huskies last year. They beat them last year in Seattle. I thought that was a big misstep, and he apologized the next day or 2 days later. But that was another one that kind of leaves you scratching your head, thinking, is this the right leadership team? You got to give them time, right? It's only been a month. But if I'm a Washington State fan, I'm not convinced we've got the right leadership in place yet. I need to be convinced, of course, throughout the rest of the season.
Sample size is too small, though, because if you look back a year ago, Arizona fans wanted Brent Brennan fired. Jonathan Smith was on shaky ground with Michigan State fans. Jedd Fisch at Washington was struggling. He'd lost an Apple Cup. I think that first transition year, it's got to be like this. It's got to be, it's just absolutely crazy for these coaches. So I think you need more runway to make that decision.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
It raises questions. I think that's fair. And look at Mike Gundy. You can't come out and say we don't have the money to compete, because that's not what anybody wants to hear. Your AD doesn't want to hear it. Your president doesn't want to hear it. Your fans don't want to hear it. Show me the baby. Don't complain about the labor pains. And so Mike Gundy, he's out. And then you see Rogers do it. You can't do that, even though we all know it. Everybody knows there's gaps.
Yep.
All right. But you have to go out and you have to play money ball. You are, the Las Vegas A's or the Sacramento A's, and you're trying to beat the Yankees. Okay. And that's the predicament Washington State, Oregon State, and the Pac-12 schools are in right now.
It is. And we've seen that, Oregon State got walloped, right? And Bray, to his credit, Bray didn't go out there and complain about the disparity in revenue and cash.
I liked what he said too. I think Bray helped himself a couple ways in this Civil War game. One, they snapped the ball like a normal team on special teams. Okay, so they're able to get the snap off. And look, you talking about moral victories. That was a big one. I asked him before the game. I said, "Are you going to snap the ball like a Pop Warner team, or are you going to snap it like a regular college football team?" He said, "I'm going to leave it for the Oregon Ducks to figure that out." He didn't want to tip his hand.
Right.
So they snapped the ball normally. The end of the first quarter, Wilner, this is a 7-7 game. I saw Mike Parker, voice of the Beavers, and Jerry Allen, voice of the Ducks, in the press box during that intermission. And I said, "Hey, Beavers lead 7-7. Like this was a victory for Oregon State to be in the game. They were running the ball a little bit. They looked like they were going to be fine on defense. And then, of course, Oregon's athleticism and talent just caved the whole thing in. It's 21-7 at half, and then ends up, a 34-point win for Oregon. I give Bray a little bit of credit. I think it helped him. After the game, he said, "No moral victories." He said, this is about winning.
Yeah.
And which I like. And I think that was the right message. Now, can he regroup before a Friday night game against Houston at home? Can they win that game? They're a double-digit dog at home. I have not seen that in this case, but I think, people don't trust Oregon State right now, and we'll see how he does down the back nine here, so to speak.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Houston's good. Houston could be the surprise team in the Big 12. So this is one of those, I think, that is a little bit deceiving for fans, right? Oh, we can beat Houston at home. That's going to be tough.
It's Houston's first time on the road. You have to consider that. But I watched Houston beat Colorado handily, and they're not bad. Nope. And there are easier games coming, though. I think, if you're Trent Bray and you're being realistic, you look at the game at Appalachian State, it's dicey, but you should be in that game, if not win that game. Tulsa, even though Tulsa beat Oklahoma State, I don't know how good Oklahoma State is. You've got Lafayette. They should win that game. You got the home and home with Jimmy Rogers and Washington State. Can you split those? Can you win them both? Those are games that they've got to go get.
They do. But boy, they have got to. The schedule is set up for them to finish with some momentum, but what is the bar going to be for Scott Barnes, right? Have you gotten any sense for what he expects out of Trent Bray in order to have year 3?
He said progress. He said, basically they need to look better on the field. He didn't talk about wins, and he took some responsibility. Barnes said, Trent Bray didn't put the schedule together. I did. And if you look at their schedule, they have the number 2 schedule in the country right now as far as strength of schedule. Notre Dame and Florida are right after them. Yeah. So, it hasn't been an easy start, but they should have a win, and they've looked sloppy. And I think that's what makes people worry.
Yeah.
And, but I got the sense in my conversations with Scott Barnes that he is not going to make a change with Trent Bray, that he's sticking with him. They owe him $3.6 million after this season. They're not in a position right now where they can go and spend. They also point out that Jonathan Smith didn't have a winning season until his 4th year at Oregon State. He went 3 years in a row where he was under 500 each season. So, if Jonathan Smith's teams lined up right and snapped the ball, and, they looked competitive in the 2nd and 3rd years. So we'll see. This back end, if it gets to 0-7-ish, I think then maybe it's a different calculus for Barnes. But 0-4, I think he kind of expected they were going to be 1-3 best case scenario, so I think that's where they're at.
Gotcha. That's a good segue for us.
Yeah. Let's pivot into this. What's going to happen in 2026 for the Pac-12? I had a little bit of reporting on this. I know you've been around it too, that the Pac-12, it looks like they're not going to add a football only member for 26, no additional expansion options unless something, shape shifts in the group of 5. So it looks like they're going with 7 conference games, 8 members playing football, 7 conference games. And then there becomes a question, like, do you do a home and home like Washington State and Oregon State are going to do this season? Or do you go out and you try to find a arrangement, not an alliance, not a partnership, but an arrangement with another conference, a group of 5 conference likely? Is it the Sun Belt? Is it the MAC? Is it Conference USA? Is it the American? It ain't going to be the Mountain West. We know that.
Nope.
So who do you go out and who do you target? I did a little reporting on that, but how do you feel about that? 7 conference games, not going after a football only member. Let's start there.
Well, it doesn't. I mean, there just doesn't seem like there is a football only member to get, right? And that it kind of has been trending that way for a few months. I feel like, to me, they should play 8 conference games, because that reduces what you got to do in the non-conference in terms of the money, and just play a home and home with a rotating situation. What they need more than anything else is flexibility with their schedule, because we're seeing this. In fact, what was it yesterday? The ACC announces we're playing, we're going to move to a 9-game conference schedule. And we're going to have a policy in place. Everybody's got to play at least 10 Power 4 opponents, right? The Big 12, same thing, 10. SEC, 10. There is a dwindling number of slots available if you're Oregon State or whoever and you want to get a power home and home series with a power conference opponent. There's dwindling slots available. But at the same time, some of these teams are going to be breaking contracts because their conference schedules got tougher. And it's going to unfold, I think, over the next few months. And if I'm the Pac-12, I would stay as flexible as possible for as long as possible, because you never know when somebody's going to come calling and say, hey, can you come here for $1.5 million, right? Well, if the Pac-12 has set it up so that they've got the home and home series, that's a lot easier to untangle than if it has locked itself into some kind of agreement with a different with the Mid-American or Sun Belt.
I disagree a little bit with it, because I think you don't want losses. And if you do the home and home, you're creating more losses within your own conference, or creating the potential. And by the way, who wants to play Boise State in that home and home? And so I think there could be some problems there. I think the better strategy is to identify a conference that you can beat, like the Sun Belt or Conference USA. They jump out to me, and identify some schools maybe in the central time zone. And you say, hey, because these Power 4s are going to be canceling contracts with a lot of the G5 schools, I think there's going to be more availability there. And you go, hey, we want to have an arrangement with you. We want to play, 4 of our teams get a home game, 4 of your teams get a home game. It's a 1-year deal in 2026, but I think it's a real opportunity for the Pac-12 to maybe go, hey, can you go 6-2 or 7-1 in those games, and really create the perception that you are clearly and definitively better than the Sun Belt, or you're so far, you're light years ahead of the Sun Belt. Could you go 8-0 in those games? So I would try to schedule that, and try to collect maybe more inventory for your TV partner by having those, 4 more home games there. But I really worry about, the whole idea of, playing more games and creating the potential for more losses. I don't want Colorado State to get stuck playing Boise State twice, or, Oregon State get stuck, playing Washington State twice, if these programs are supposed to be better. I would try to, just for 1 year, because ideally what you pick up somebody in 27, you pick up another member.
Well, I mean, if it's a 1-year deal, then that's different. I'm thinking that this is something that they would have to, lock into for basically the duration of their media deal for 5 years. But if it's a 1-year deal thing, then maybe that's right. I just think longer haul, it's going to be that's going to be hard, and strength of schedule is going to be really important in the playoff calculation.
Yeah.
Right. So we'll see. They've got a lot of options, but they probably would, if it had worked out that they could have gotten 1 more football member, it would have been easier.
And I kind of wonder too, does UNLV's thinking change in a year? Does Memphis's thinking change? We've seen so much, and so much of this feels fluid to me. But I think what we're clearly seeing, and you point out, with everybody going to 9 conference games, there's a separation that has always existed between the Power 4 and the Power 5 in the group of 5 and the group of 6. That gap is widening. There's going to be less opportunities for those group of 5, group of 6 conferences. And then you have, even within the Big Ten and the SEC, such separation that's happening, and the Big Ten trying to say that they need 4 automatics, and the SEC basically just declaring war on the CFP committee, going, if you don't get this right, there will be an or else, because our conference is great.
Yeah.
And if you don't see it, there's an or else coming.
Yep. It's all unfolded very quickly. And they still have to figure out the format for next year, right? And the other thing is there's an opening in the contract after the 27 season where the CFP could get changed again.
Yeah.
And so to me, the more flexibility the Pac-12 has for the longest possible time, the better chance it can take advantage of an opportunity to, improve its standing, so to speak.
And what needs to happen? I mean, if you are because you hear the New World Pac-12 ADs are all saying, the Power Five. They use that as a talking point. They try to say Power Five. Everyone else in America says Power Four. What can the Pac-12 do to create the perception on the field that they are a power conference? Is there anything that they could do?
I don't think so. I think it's a lost cause, to be honest with you. And I think that a lot of people around the country just every time they hear the Pac-12 as being, saying Power Five or we're top five, I think there's a lot of eye rolling based on the people I've talked to around the country. And, I understand you're trying to get a message out and you're trying to stay positive and raise the bar, but you also have to be realistic with that messaging strategy. And so we'll see how it plays out. But right now, look, if you're looking at the Pac-12, the new Pac-12 stacked up against the current American's a better conference. Look what the Americans done this year. They got 6 wins over Power 4 opposition. It's a good league.
Yeah, and I'm watching UNLV, I'm watching New Mexico, but South Florida, Memphis, North Texas, Tulane, all with really look like they're playing better football. I want to dismiss that as all right. There's a lot of transition. Washington State, Oregon State are distracted. These schools are getting, but you can't ignore the result on the field. And
Nope.
I think the only way the Pac-12 can punch its way back in there is by getting a team in the playoff multiple years and just sort of separating itself further from the other conferences. But I don't see that right now. I don't see that happening on the field in this year.
No, absolutely not. And they also got to figure out, all right, what are the best, the teams that have the best chance to do that over the next 5 years, right? Because of resources, tradition, recruiting, all that kind of thing. And then figure out a strategy for scheduling and everything else that gives their best programs the best chance for success.
Leads us to the weekend, big weekend, high stakes. You got Alabama, Georgia. You have Oregon, Penn State. Ohio State's going to play Washington in a fun game. Where are your eyes heading into this weekend?
You're going to Happy Valley, huh?
Yes. Happy Valley for a whiteout, about as far away as you can travel. Brutal travel day, man. Again, let's not talk about the labor pains, but that is a ridiculous travel schedule. You and I, before we went on to record this, we're talking about what is the equivalent. And it's probably schools that say, hey, I got to go to Pullman or, it feels like an outpost, right? But I've got friends who live there, I have a friend who teaches at Penn State. And that town is a buzz about Oregon visiting. I think the pressure is all on James Franklin and Penn State. In fact, I think there's probably, given what happened last year with Oregon as the 1 seed and 13-0, and I'm not going to say that there's ever a good loss, but I think Oregon going there and losing close wouldn't be the worst thing for the Ducks, right? No. It sets them up to host maybe a playoff game.
Yep, absolutely. As long as it's close, loss, and they've got still a little bit of margin for error after that, right? In terms of getting to 10-2, that's the bar to get in the playoff. If you're Oregon, let's just get to be 10-2. They don't play Michigan. They don't play Ohio State. They got Indiana at home. They got USC at home. They certainly have the Husky game, but this is like the big hurdle in a lot of ways on their schedule. I think that they are in a little bit of trouble. That's just my view. They've looked really good, but I kind of feel like Penn State, first of all, Jim Knowles, defensive coordinator, he was at Ohio State last year. He knows the Ducks. He's got 2 weeks to prepare, and he has got a lot of NFL draft picks on his defense. And we saw Penn State run for 300 yards against the Ducks in the Big Ten championship game. This is going to be a real challenge for Oregon. There's no doubt about it.
I look back at that game, that Big Ten championship game, and I was in that news conference. James Franklin came in. He was annoyed. He looked at the stat sheet, Wilner, and they had 300 yards rushing. They outgained the Ducks with total yards. They had won that game everywhere but the scoreboard. But the thing that jumped out at me is, they threw 39 passes in that game against Oregon. They didn't need to do that. Why were they throwing on 2nd and 1? They had no reason to throw the football in that game. And, their quarterback throws 2 picks. That's the difference in the game. I think Penn State keeps this on the ground. I'm with you. I like Penn State to win this game. I think it really does feel to me like Oregon hosting Ohio State last year at Autzen. I think that stadium's going to be a buzz. I think James Franklin needs this. I think Penn State has a chip on its shoulder. Oregon making that long trip.
Yeah.
It doesn't line up for Oregon. But I think you have to look back at last season and go, look, Ohio State lost at Oregon, lost at home against Michigan, regrouped, won the whole thing. And that's kind of what I see Oregon doing. And I'll even go back and, I was looking at Northwestern. I was looking at the Civil War. They win both of those games. They don't cover the spread in either of those games. Late in the game, what are they doing? They're substituting freely. They get Dante Moore out of the game. I think Oregon learned from Ohio State a year ago. I think they're managing the season much better. They don't have pedal to the metal right now. They're trying to win these games and limit the snap count for their starters.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. If I'm Oregon, I'm trying to follow as best I can the path that leads to a home playoff game, right? And that could mean probably that means 2 losses. But that, to me, if you're Oregon, that is the thing you want more than anything else, more than a Big Ten title, is you want a home playoff game.
Yeah, isn't that ridiculous? Where else are you looking? I'm looking at Alabama, Georgia. I'm thinking about Kalen DeBoer because I think Georgia's going to win this game, but it matters how they win. If they embarrass Alabama, I think DeBoer starts to get a little warm in his seat.
Could be. We don't know what the number is of losses that would potentially cause Alabama to make a coaching change, but you'd have to think before, and he'd be halfway there. Also depends a little on how they look, I think. If they get beat by double digits, that will be real bad, especially because they won last year at home against Georgia. So I think that's a good one. That's going to be right up against head-to-head against Oregon Penn State. Oregon Penn State on NBC, Alabama Georgia on ABC. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that.
If you're a
split viewer, oh my goodness,
split screen.
And you got the Washington Ohio State game is at 12:30.
Yeah,
I actually think that's going to be really close. I saw the Huskies the Buckeyes open at I think 14-point favorite. It's down to like 10. Yeah. I think that is going to be a close game all the way to the end.
Yeah, Damon Williams Jr. gives you a shot, but the question is, can Washington at the point of attack, at the line of scrimmage, can they handle the physicality of Ohio State? Yeah. It's a different animal. And that was the problem a year ago. So I think it just gives Washington a real good test of where they are physically. I saw Rick Neuheisel's picking the Huskies in an upset. He's crawling out on that limb. I'm not willing to go there, but I'm like you. And there's another piece of the puzzle here in all these games, Wilner. I'm still not sure who's good and who's not.
For sure.
Oregon's untested.
Yep.
Penn State's untested.
Yep.
I'm looking at Ohio State, Washington. I'm still trying to figure out, yes, Georgia beat Tennessee, but how good is Tennessee? And we're starting to get some sample size, but I need 2 more weeks before I know who's good. And so we're still trying to figure some of this out.
As a voter, an AP poll voter, it usually takes me until early October to have a real sense for who's good, because by then you've got enough real material results. But this week we'll add to that total. And we should mention USC at Illinois is the big noon game. Trojans playing at 9 a.m. body clock. So a rare case USC is on Fox at 9. Washington is on CBS at 12:30. Oregon is on NBC at 4:30. The 3 Big Ten network broadcasts all have a West Coast school. All of them are facing a ranked opponent. This is kind of what they signed up for, right?
Yeah, this is going to be big time.
Yeah.
It's going to be a great weekend. We're going to have you all covered. We'll be back next week with another episode. You can find my work at joncanzano.com. I will be all over Oregon and Penn State this weekend. And Wilner, you can find him at wilnerhotline.com.
Good luck with your travel this week.
Thank you, my friend.
All right. Thanks, everybody.